Nobody tells you what happens the day after your last game. Not your coaches, not your parents, not your friends, not anybody. And if you're watching this, you probably already know what I'm talking about. That very last game, that very last practice, the very last rep, whether this is in sports, whether this is in school, whether this is in your job, whether this is in the military, whatever that path may be, I know you remember what that last feeling was like. For me, it was football. Football was the biggest piece and part of my life. I played football since I was 4 years old, stopping when I was around 21, 22. So that large chunk of my life, the large 17, 18 years of my life, was filled with this. And I remember being at Texas Tech, and at the time I wasn't a full ride scholarship player. I had transferred schools from where I was originally playing at. I had went to the Air Force Academy my first 2 years of school and had a full ride scholarship, so things were a lot different there. But I knew I still loved the game. So I was like, you know what? I'm at Texas Tech. Why not walk on and see what it's like? I walk on, make the team. Unfortunately, there were some injuries and stuff that happened there as well. And then I remember the day coach was like, I guess even to give some backstory on that, I was working at the time because I also, once again, wasn't a scholarship player. So I had to get a job, I had to find a job to bring some money in. And I was working this job at the same time while playing. And I remember one day I was telling all the coaches like, "Hey, still I have a job. There's things I still have to do on top of this." So there was one day I had missed a dinner from football to go to work. And then the very next day I was cut. And I remember the conversation with my head coach and him just saying, there's nothing really that I can tell you. I tell you players time and time again that you cannot be missing dinners. You can't be missing these routines. And, for being a walk-on player and not knowing the rules and this being really my first time being involved with this staff, uh, it was a real sudden change, something that I wasn't expecting, and it felt like it was just ripped away from me when I didn't even really get the opportunity, you know. And to have such of a love for the game and a love and a passion for something that I was doing, and to have that being stripped away from you just because of the words of just one person can shift your entire mindset on so many things. That day felt like my world had just ended. I remember calling my mom and figuring out what do I do, what can I was kind of at a loss. She's like, if you really want this, fight for it. I'm calling coach up, texting him, hey, is there a time that we can talk? And then I remember meeting back up with him again, and then he turned his back on me mid conversation. And having that really changed my thought process on how I look at life, at what things that I do on a day to day, how I want to design my life, because I'll never want to be in a position again where somebody has full control over over my life, full control over my life and the destiny of my life. I felt such anger, I felt such frustration, I felt such disappointment, but I also felt another sense of freeness because I had time. I had more availability in my day where I felt like I could utilize the energy that I had. And the reason why I say that is because When all of those things stop, when all of the schedules stop and the patterns that you've been living for so long, it opens up that time for you. So that very next day, it was like, I don't have to go to workouts. I don't have to go to an obligation of dinners and breakfasts and making sure I get to lunch and all of these meetings. I don't have to do that. I have time back. I have freedom back. And it felt nice for a moment. It felt nice for the first week. But then those weeks to come, it more felt like confusion. It felt like I didn't know what was going on. Now I'm in a world that I'm not used to. I'm involved now with people that I'm not used to. I felt like the people around me were moving on much faster than I was, you know. I was still in this pain that football was over and this mixed emotion of now having a schedule back, but trying to conversate about these feelings and these emotions with friends or families or old teammates didn't hit home. Like it was hard to talk to these people about it because they didn't understand what I was necessarily going through. Everyone else seemed like things were okay, like everything was just fine and dandy, but you guys don't understand that feeling of something being ripped away from you. So with this now free time that I have and not being able to talk to anybody, not having a unit to associate with, then I began to isolate myself. I began to spend a lot more time alone, whether it was going to the gym, whether it was just being at my apartment. Anything that I did, I'd rather be alone to myself because I knew that the people around me weren't going to understand the words that I was going to say. They wasn't going to understand the lingos that I had, the language that I had, the intensity that I had. People weren't going to understand that. N- Nobody has the language for what you're feeling. You know, it's hard to categorize it, especially in that moment. Were you supposed to call it depression? Were you supposed to call it laziness? Was it confusion? At least that's how it felt to me. I couldn't pinpoint it. How do I categorize any of this? How difficult it was when people would ask me how I'm feeling. It's like I really don't know. It's hard to just sum up everything when 18 years worth of effort, 18 years of blood, sweat, and tears just gone. And how do you find that? How do you find that flow again? How do you find that rhythm again? And I want you to know, if you are dealing with that, if you are dealing with that feeling of not knowing how to really express that, believe me, you're not alone in that. And this doesn't have to deal with just you athletes. These are dealing with things of school, of getting out of school. Maybe things didn't go well in school academically for you. Maybe things are not going completely well in the job. And I want you to know that it is okay to not have that figured out. And I want you to know none of that stuff is a weakness. Every serious individual is going to go through that, especially in your 20s. It's going to happen. It's hot, sweat. I want you to know that it's not a you problem. This is more of a transition problem. A transition with no set roadmap. You don't have the guidance to help reclaim and find who you are, you know, because of just the fact of you don't know who to talk to, you don't know the outlet of other people that have been through this same feeling that you have. And I want to share at least one thing that helped me figure out how to start flowing is silence. Silence was the first real thing that you are going to have to face. That silence is going to feel very, very uncomfortable. It's going to feel extremely uncomfortable. And not saying it to scare you or to frighten you in any type of way, but it's because you've had such a routine for such a long time that this is going to be very, very new for you. This is going to be the first time where you're able to sit with you and guide a life for yourself rather than somebody else always having a schedule for you. That's how things were in college. You pretty much had an itinerary of everything you need to do for the day. Breakfast, lunch, meetings, practice, lifts, no matter what, everything was timed out for you. Even for game days or traveling, you know exactly what your plans were going to be. Same thing with school, you have your class schedule. Same thing with work, you know exactly the things that you're going to do. And somebody's always telling you this, rather than having a silence of your own and having the thoughts in your own head. Is it a loud process? Yeah, in your head. The silence is so crazy that it is so much louder, if that makes sense. It's a feeling that is partly, man, it's hot out here. Man, for people out here in this weather, I mean, I guess it is because I have the hoodie on and I just came from a walk. But besides the point, I want you to know that silence is necessary. So take some time to just sit with who you are. Learn the way that you think, what things that you do think about. Mm, Start identifying the things that you want to think about. Start taking some more moments to identify with who you want to be and who you want to actually become. If any of this sounds familiar to you, I want you to know that you are not broken by any means. You're not lazy by any means. And I promise you, you're actually not lost. And you're not as lost as you think you really are, though, either. Promise you, you're not. You just haven't been shown what comes next. And that's more of what I want this page to be about. To be able to show you a fresh perspective on how things can be.